Hey everyone, it's Karley Hall, and in today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make this project using a 50% polyester, 50% cotton sweatshirt blank, and we're using a sublimation technique, just regular sublimation onto a cotton poly blend sweatshirt. I'm going to show you how to do this and how to avoid press lines. So if you've made a project and you've got those dreaded press lines around your image where you can see a crease or even just marks from your press, this tutorial will hopefully walk you through how to avoid those lines, and if you can't avoid them, what to do to remove them. So if you're new to sublimation and you have no idea what sublimation is or how to get started, I do have other tutorials walking you through how to set up your printer, how to get it up and running. So I will link those in the video description. But briefly, sublimation is the process where you print using a special ink and it actually turns into a gaseous state, and then it melds into the polyester fibers. So it kind of fuses into them to create a permanent bond to those polyester fibers. So you do need poly in your sweatshirt blank or your t-shirt blank to make this work. I typically don't work with anything under 80%, but this sweatshirt is 50%, and I have washed projects using these blanks and they have held up pretty well. So the lower the polyester, the more likely it is to wash out because the ink does need the polyester fibers to fuse to. So we go over that more in the other videos, but I just briefly wanted to mention that because I know I'll get tons of questions on what you can do this on. And for garments, t-shirts, sweatshirts, things like that, you do want a higher polyester content so that your ink will fuse better and will not wash out. Okay, so this tutorial was born out of necessity because I got this new press from 143 Vinyl. It's the Starcraft 8-in-1 15 by 15 press, and I love it, but there's a learning curve with all new equipment, and I was getting those dreaded press marks on my project blanks. So I'm going to show you what I've done to hopefully avoid them for the most part, and then if it happens, I'll show you how to get them out. Now, when you're looking at settings across the internet, you'll see a ton of different settings for sublimation. I am going to set my press. We want to set it to 385. That's what I'm going to recommend for this. And we're going to set it for 60 seconds. That's actually pretty low for sublimation because you'll see online that most people recommend anywhere from 385, which is where we're at, to 400. And even though 15 degrees seems like not a huge difference, it is a big difference on the type of transfer quality you'll get. So the reason I'm setting it lower is because we're using a white garment and the pressing lines will appear more vivid when you're pressing onto a lighter garment. So if you're doing light yellows, light blues, light grays, things like that. Another thing worth mentioning is that sublimation ink is similar to watercolor. So if you paint watercolor on a black piece of paper, the watercolor is not going to be as vivid as if you were to paint it on a white piece of paper. So when you're considering your designs and what color to transfer them onto, think about it as if you're working with watercolors. Would you transfer this image onto a bright red sweatshirt? You could, but the color is not opaque. So it's going to be translucent and you're going to be able to see through that ink, and most of your image will have that red coloring. So for example, if we were to transfer this onto a red sweatshirt, my ink, even though it looks like a creamy color, it would come out a little bit pink because the red would show through and all the white would be red and it would be a lot more muted, which is fine if that's the look you're going for, but it's worth noting. Okay, so now that we have some of the basics in mind, again, full tutorials linked in the video description. I won't bore you since this tutorial is about avoiding pressing lines. We will prep our project while this is heating up, and then we'll come back over here and press it. If you're curious about any of the equipment that I use, I will also link that in the video description. Most of those links are affiliate links, so by shopping through those links, that is what keeps my content on this channel free. So thank you in advance for shopping through those links. So I have a wide format Epson, which allows me to print these larger size. So I'm not sure if you can see compared to my body. This is really big. This is 13 inches by 19 inches. So my print itself is about 12 inches by 10 inches. So a good size print. Now, The first thing to avoid press lines is you're going to want to tear your image. So if you can, leaving a little bit of room on the edge so you can tear it. And I like to place it onto my working surface. Not sure if you're going to be able to see this, so I'll bring it over to you. And we're going to tear it with the image facing us. So I have the image facing me on my surface, and then I'm using my hand to guide. So I'll bring this over so you can see it. So I'm tearing the image just along the edges. I got a little close there. But you'll want to tear around the entire image so that you don't have any solid lines. And if you can see, if I can get my camera to focus here, you'll see that there's kind of like a step down. So the tear will minimize those press marks really nicely. So here's my image. Now it's all torn around the edges, making sure not to tear off any of our design. And now it's ready to transfer. I'll quickly walk you through how I prep my blanks, but again, if you want more details, head over to those more detailed tutorials. So I'm just going to roll a lint roller across my blank. I do use 2 fresh sheets when I'm doing this because you don't want there to be any lint or debris on your blank, because the ink, it will turn into that gaseous state and we don't want it to fuse to any lint or debris. This press is a swing away press, which is really cool. However, you do need a lot of clearance so that you can swing the press out of the way. I had it against the window and it did run into the window, so that's something to note. Make sure you have enough space for this to swing, or put it on a cart that is mobile so you can move it around. So I'm going to place my sweatshirt blank onto my platen, and I want to make sure that the collar or the neck seam is over the back edge of my press. We're not completely up to temperature yet, but I'm going to pre-press my blank. I have a piece of butcher paper on top, and then I'm going to swing my press back over, and we're going to press it just for 10 seconds. We're not pressing really to make it warm. Instead, we're pressing so that we can get any moisture out of the garment, because moisture is the enemy of sublimation. So just pre-press it. That will also get any wrinkles out of your garment. And I do like to press it with butcher paper because the press marks are already visible, and so this will just help avoid those press marks. Okay, speaking of the press marks, we're actually going to remove our sweatshirt blank. I'm going to walk you through something because I don't want to do this while it's hot. This step is best done when your press is not hot, because then you can have your sweatshirt blank in the press. But we want to close down our press. We'll leave it on. We want to close down our press, and I want it to be medium pressure. So I want it to be enough pressure where it feels tight when I push it down, but not where I have to strain. So one tip is that you can loosen your tension knob all the way to as loose as it will go. Oops, started the counter. Okay, so now when I push down, you can see how light that pressure is. I don't want it to be that light. I want it to be medium. So we're going to do 2 full turns to see where that puts us. So 1, 2 full turns. Now when I close it, it's a little bit better. Also keep in mind that you will have a t-shirt under there, so it will add a little bit more pressure. So I have 2 full turns. I'm not sure if I loosened it all the way, but again, you want it to be, you can see it when I push down, I kind of have to engage my core a little bit to push that down, and there is some pressure. So that seems good. Let's put our sweatshirt back in and test it. We'll cover it back up. And I'm going to press it down, and you can see that I had to engage to push it down. Now let's see how our press lines look after 10 seconds. And we're still under temperature right now. We're at 356. Okay, now let me show you what this looks like so you get an idea of these press lines that we're working with. It's a little difficult to see since we're working with a white sweatshirt blank, but let's see if we can catch the light. What I want you to see is that the press is not burning the garment, and the press lines are pretty minimal. So that is what we want. We don't want super visible lines when we're setting the pressure. So medium pressure. Okay, so my press is up to temperature. I have my sweatshirt blank kind of hanging off the press right now because I want to line up my design. So I'm going to place my design using this little ruler, and I'm going to tape it into place with some heat resistant tape. So you can see here that it's taped into place, and then we'll slide it onto the press so that the neckline is off the press. If you're working with thinner materials, you may want to place a sheet of butcher paper in between, but since I've pressed these sweatshirts, I don't think I need a sheet of butcher paper in between them. So I'm just going to place one on top of my image in case there's any blowout. Place my press into position, and then again, we're pressing for 60 seconds. Okay, so we're done pressing this, and you can see here that there was a bit of blowout onto the butcher paper, so good thing we had that sheet of butcher paper. And we'll peel this off, making sure that we don't hit our press. And while it's still hot, one of the ways to minimize any lines is to take your lint roller and roll over the edges. So the edges of the design where we tore it are, I would say, pretty minimal. Let me get you closer. So you can see here where I tore the paper, your eye really can't follow where the edges are. You can see here that we have minimal press lines from the edge of the heat press because the pressure isn't super firm. Let me hold it up so you can see a better view. So the press lines, oh, there you can see right there. Okay, so you can see on this edge, the pressure is still pretty, so the pressure is pretty light, and you can still see that press line on the edge of my design. Now, if you had press lines around your image, my recommendation would be to put it back on your press, cover it with a new sheet of butcher paper, so a fresh sheet, and then repress just the image for about 10 seconds to minimize any of the paper press lines. Since we don't have any paper lines and we just have the actual heat press outline, we are going to do something different. Before we tackle the press lines, I do want to talk about how the color is super vibrant, even transferring at that lower temperature. So you can see that the black is a true black. Let's see, if you compare it to my Sharpie, the black is very black, and the transfer itself is really great. It came out super clear, beautiful press. So the time and the temperature settings in terms of the transfer, I could probably play around with my pressure a little bit more to get the press lines even less. So here is a top view look at the sweatshirt. And again, the press lines are so minimal, but if you were providing this to a customer, you don't want there to be any room to complain. So you can see here at the bottom, this press line, and at the top, this press line here, I want to eliminate. So around here, we can clean up just a bit, but you can see it's super minimal. Like, I am being so nitpicky right now about these press lines, but you can see the importance of playing with your pressure so that you don't have to deal with this at all. So what we're going to do, I have an easy press mat under here. You can see the press mark is on the back too, so we'll address that. And I'm just heating up my Easy Press Mini. You don't need an Easy Press Mini branded by Cricut. You can just use a tiny little iron or a home iron, and I have it heating up to the highest temperature setting. All right, so we're up to temperature, and now I'm just going to work continuously moving around. I don't want to burn my garment. Polyester is a delicate material, so it does burn easier than 100% cotton, for example. So when it burns, it will turn into like a yellowing, and that's what we're trying to avoid. If your press is set too hot or the pressure is too firm, you may get a full yellow mark across your white garment, and that we do not want. So you don't want to do this too long and burn your material. So moving constantly And then I'm just going to find where the press lines are and work my way over them. I'm not sure how well this is translating on camera, but in person, the lines are so minimal, I can barely even see them. You can go over your image. It's not going to erase your image, but I do try to avoid my image as much as possible. If your press is set too hot, you may actually melt the fibers of your polyester, which is what we do not want to happen. So right now, we do not want to leave this in one spot too long and accidentally melt the fibers or burn the fabric and yellow it. So again, just trying to move your easy press or iron so that you're not in one spot too long. And just erase those press lines. Now let's turn it over and check out the back just to see what's going on in the back. Okay, so you can see the square on the back. So next time I will decrease my pressure even more. Again, learning curve on new equipment. And we've all been there where we're trying to press, and unfortunately with garments, I do sacrifice one usually. I have like a practice sweatshirt that I've just pressed over and over again so that I can try it out on different presses, different settings, and I do really small images all over it so I can get a good idea of where my issues are. Hopefully these tips will allow you to sacrifice fewer blanks and nail down your settings a little bit quicker so that you're not wasting material. But you can see that these ones on the back are coming out really, really easy. I'd say that looks pretty good. Okay, here is a look at the final project. I'm trying to move around so you can see that there's no yellowing, no burning, no press lines. So like I mentioned, I'm still trying to figure out the settings for my new press. And ideally, we would end up with no press marks at all, but that's not always the case. So I wanted to show you that if this happens to you, it may not be the end of the world because we can get those press lines out and it's like it never happened. So of course, I'm still working on the settings, but I would recommend pressing at a lower temperature with medium pressure so that you don't get any marks at all. So I'll fine tune that and see if I can come up with a way to get the perfect settings and share those with you. If you have any questions on this process at all, make sure to leave those in the comments. And if you found this video helpful, make sure to like it and consider subscribing to my channel because that is what keeps me going. And I really appreciate your support. So thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next video.